In my restless reviews, I see that town so eerie and so marketable. The town with the same name that if you asked just about any gamer what they thought was the scariest game they've ever played, then they would answer
Silent Hill 2.
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 2.
To study your craft, sometimes you gotta reach out beyond your medium in order to learn new possibilities. Thus, enter Silent Hill 2 for the PlayStation 2, which also came out in 2002. Who knew? For those of you unfamiliar with this little gem, some of you might be wondering, what about Silent Hill 1? Well...
Silent Hill for the PlayStation 1 was revolutionary for back in its day and started the successful Scary franchise.
This little guy is a self-contained story, needing no context and no predecessor. But this game is personally one of the eeriest things I have ever experienced, more than some of the great horror movie classics, and its story is stellar. So enough lagging behind, let's pop this sucker right in and see what makes it so scary. God help me.
The story begins with our main character James, reflecting on his life as well as his strange predicament. He received a letter from his wife to come meet her in the town of Silent Hill, old vacation spot. But the twist is, she's been dead for 3 years. With the road blocked up ahead, he takes a meandering path down, slowly descending into a nebulous fog, kinda like his own psyche.
By the way, to those who haven't guessed already, this game is very cerebral. But don't worry, along the way, I'll hold your hand. If only someone could hold mine.
He comes across a young woman named Angela, whom we'll meet several times.
I'm looking for Silent Hill. Is this the right way?
Yeah. This town, there's something wrong with it.
Where we notice neither character seems really normal, or should I say, stable.
Her name's Mary. She's my wife.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, she's dead.
You don't say. Yeah, well, It doesn't sound concerning to my safety whatsoever. Go on.
I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not.
But wait, does that mean James is crazy?
I'm not crazy. At least, I don't think so.
Oh, but my dear viewer, when in Silent Hill...
Most everyone's mad here.
James finally enters the town following a trail of blood. You know, because they always lead to sunshine and Hershey chocolate kisses. Then he encounters a monster, which James is alerted by the static of a radio he finds and carries around.
Huh. Well, you know, that would be a pretty nifty tool for ghost hunting. Look out, guys! Phew. Job well done.
To comment on the gameplay, it entails mostly puzzle solving, beating monsters with awkward camera angles, which are actually pretty sweet when the developers want to add some tension to a scene or moment, and walking, oh, there's a lot of walking. Should have made a built-in MP3 player like they did in Metal Gear Solid 4. Gonna have to make the time pass somehow. And the doors, oh, so many locked doors. Maybe a look into James's psyche, where the recesses of his disturbed mind holding secrets and key plot points, but still a pain in the ass. So you gotta venture forth through some empty apartments in order to reach the park. Very special place. You find a conveniently placed flashlight and upgrade your clumsy whacking to an only somewhat aimable handgun, shotgun, and hunting rifle. Though I'm still rather fond of the chainsaw.
Groovy.
All of this running around and obscure puzzle solving like a Zelda dungeon, and then we see... Well, this is one heck of an intro to the most iconic character of the entire franchise, Pyramid Head. And if you haven't guessed, there are some sexual undertones in the story. The game really isn't that graphic, and this certainly is one of the most shocking scenes. And as for what Pyramid Head is,
Well, I think we're gonna need some more context on that, so I'm gonna take that for my later folder.
James also meets a troublesome little girl named Laura and an overweight loser named Eddie, who acts suspiciously around dead bodies.
I didn't do it. I swear I didn't kill anybody.
So James finds his way out, but not before confronting the Pyramid Hat guy who warps out of there via metallic water. And you come to the park to meet...
Do I look like your girlfriend?
Well, this interesting plot point shows us Maria, a doppelganger of some kind to James's wife. Intentionally confusing, it adds more mystery as to what it is James is expected to find in this town. So she joins your party, and you find Eddie with Laura, following her to save her from the monsters lurking in the town. And so you follow the White Rabbit down Carroll Street.
I love these references.
Even the street names are tributes to famous horror names.
It's the little things.
You follow Laura to a nearby hospital, which does not show up on the map.
Damn you, MapQuest!
You find some weird shit left behind by doctors observing psychotic patients, as well as a past patient's diaries talking about an other side that they visit, a stray diary left by a suicidal woman, tragic, and a patient that makes you find four different keys to enter a chest that contains hair. As creepy as that may be, James uses it to fish out a key dropped into a drain pipe.
Then why doesn't he use his own hair?
But then you find the little Dickens, who doesn't trust James that much, and being the deceiving little rascal that she is, she lures James into a room with the promise of Mary's letter and locks him in.
Seriously? The oldest trick in the book? James be crazy and dumb.
And then, boss time! These delightful things are the flesh lips.
We're just gonna save that for some later exposition.
And then enter the alternate Silent Hill. Sirens and darkness beckon a rusty metal monster-infested version of the same building you just explored. In the first game, this change of the environment was given more acknowledgement and was loosely explained why it happened at the end, but in this story, they just sort of happen. Usually when James experiences something major or traumatic. So without context, this alternate setting represents the shit getting real, including psychotic nurses and doctors, a gag to the Resident Evil games, another famous horror survival series, hearing an unknown voice talk to James by name like a game show host beckoning him to the third floor to solve a puzzle or be killed,
but be careful if you're wrong.
and then losing Maria, finding Maria, and watching her die. Which, to the game's credit, does show characters' reactions to death in a believable way, compared to recent games like, oh my god, I killed someone, this will scar me forever. Oh well, scoop up, baby. So after fooling around in the streets, you arrive at fuck, Jesus Christ, fuck, no, fuck you. You arrive at the Historical Society. Then you descend for a long time into the underground prison, which is surprisingly less eventful than you would think. I mean, we see Eddie acting even creepier. We hear someone scream in the bathroom stall. We hear a ghost horse on the gallows. And strangest of all, wax and a horseshoe make a handle somehow strong enough to lift up a trapdoor and James could not himself lift. You also find an amusing book talking about demon summoning. Note, this is a reference to the plot of the first game, and James' reaction further distances the relevance of the last plot, making a clever and amusing Easter egg. Thank you for coming. You come to some gruesome sights in a morgue, going down one hole into the next, and the next, and the next. Kind of like American McGee's Alice, if it were finally turned into a live-action movie, or a good sequel. One of the holes you also need to jump into is within an indoor graveyard, and as if its existence wasn't unsettling enough, the three graves you come across are Eddie's, Angela's, and yourself. That's spooky foreshadowing. And then you come to a labyrinth. Seriously, get that MP3 out. And then you find...
Are you confusing me with someone else?
Well, yes. Maria, in fact, appears to be alive with some kind of identity crisis.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So, you're Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
On your way to find a way to free her, you hear Angela screaming, or you defend her from the doorman, or two humanoids fucking on a walking bed all melted together. The enemy, as strange as it is, it's Angela's reaction to her rescue that holds more tension.
I know what you're up to. It's always the same. You're only after one thing.
No, That's not true at all.
But just force me. Beat me up like he always did.
So, morally confused, you now have to solve a hanging man puzzle with literal hanging men, with the emphasis on each criminal's sins. And as the hallway gets bloodier, we come to a freezer/meat locker where we learn Eddie has gone off his rocker from a lifetime of people teasing him and has finally snapped and murdered someone. You say the wrong thing and he attacks you too. James has no choice but to commit the unthinkable. And again, time is taken to reflect the magnitude of the scene, instead of beep bop beep.
Interestingly enough, both Angela and Eddie seem to reflect one another. Both tired of abuse, one seeks her own destruction while the other sees to others.
To make things worse, James reaches Maria too late.
But moving right along.
Moving right along, dooga-dum.
You keep going down, down, down,
To the bottom of the sea.
until you reach outside at sea level. The more you know. Grab a boat and you row out into the foggy lake. Just watch out for giant mutated fish. And you row towards the lighthouse light on the other side. Ho, shit's getting deep. And you arrive at the Destin Lake House Hotel, the vacation spot of your beloved late wife. And what awaits you at the hotel? More locked doors! As well as teleporting brooms. What the fuck? Until you finally make it up to room 312 with a videotape left by your wife, how leads James to the startling conclusion that it was he who in fact killed his wife.
Killer! Why'd you do it? I hate you!
And poor James seems unable to move on until a radio signal from Maria calls him to come rescue her.
That voice.
Gosh, you're always flip-flopping, dead and not dead. Make up your mind, woman!
But, ho! The hotel is transformed into a rundown hellhole. The one item of interest is a book called The Crimson Ceremony, which describes the demon summoning again, recalling the first game, with the idea of trying to influence James's destiny.
Keep that in mind, players.
Then we meet Angela one last time.
No, don't pity me. I'm not worth it.
So after failing to rescue the princess, you exit the room in order to re-enter it, and without the burning staircase. No, just... fuck no. We see more of those flesh-lipped monsters, and now we can better understand them. The twisted, contorted creature in a bed-like frame seems to represent James's wife in her final days. She was very ill for a long 3 years, growing nasty and bitter to a point that she regretted the nasty words she lashed out at James, symbolized by those lips. And this drove James away from her, creating a guilt and even a void for sexual disconnection. Then enters Pyramid Head, symbolizing James's guilt to serve as judgment as well as executioner. Therefore, that's why we see Maria being killed twice. Thrice. To help James reconcile with the repressed memory of when he took the life of his wife.
The life of a wife is ended by the knife.
But James won't have it anymore with his victimized pity tripped in Silent Hill and fights back the demons that have haunted him. And with their purpose no longer needed, they off themselves. Which makes for a pretty short boss fight. Collect 2 eggs to unlock the doors ahead of you.
Whatever that means.
Rebirth, maybe? I don't know. Might as well whip out a Phoenix Down. And the final hallway is long enough to hear a conversation between James and Mary in an emotionally tense final trek to the finish line. But before you can claim to have beaten one of the scariest games of all time, you have one last obstacle. Based on how the player goes about playing the story, you have the option of seeing one of 2 final encounters and a few different endings. Some of these details include how many times you looked at Mary's photo in your inventory, or the letter you received, which you notice disappears gradually throughout the game. James has a powerful imagination. Look at the knife Angela gave you, reading that Crimson Ceremony book. See, I told you it was important. And etc. So either James confronts Maria, saying he doesn't need her anymore, or asks for forgiveness from Mary. Either way, they both transform and Jesus! A cool, M-rated version of Tim Burton's Nightmares. You fight a floating apparition / physical manifestation of your wife constrained in a bed frame, shaking head in swarms of vicious moths. Yeah, that part sounds kind of silly, but moths represent death. Keep that in mind. After the grueling battle, you're given the moment to give the final blow.
James. James.
And for whatever ending you get to read the final letter that Laura gives you from your wife, spelling out an apology to the pain she caused James and thanking him for making her happy and asking that he continue with his life happy as well. For the ending, you as the player have the choice to decide James's decision to either commit suicide, leave Silent Hill to adopt Laura and begin anew, leave with Mary, giving in to an instant gratification with the sign of repeated history,
You'd better do something about that cough.
or you find the composer of all the spooky doings was a dog. Granted, this is a running gag in each Silent Hill game, and is not canon.
And for those of you who had the fortune of coming across a special edition of the game, you would gain access to an additional prelude chapter starring Maria. Fans have argued as to whether Maria is a real person or just a figment of James's imagination.
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real.
Well...
And this Maria exclusive chapter called Born from a Wish. She wakes up and eventually finds a man locked behind a door named Ernest Baldwin, who is convinced that finding a white liquid will help bring back his daughter, Amy. Maria solves a series of puzzles and finds out Amy is actually dead and cannot reunite her with her father. Ernest seems to accept the truth that he's held back from himself and then warns her about a man named James, who is a bad man.
He's looking for the you that isn't you.
She finally opens the door to find no one is there. It's a ghost! She contemplates suicide, having no other purpose, but vaguely remembers memories of James being the one who killed his wife, but also being a good man underneath. So she decides to find him, hoping he will accept her.
So when it comes down to it, how scary is Silent Hill 2?
Fear, of course, is subjective, but I think what relates to a lot of people is how personal the story is. It's not about monsters running amok, it's about a man coming to terms with the loss of his wife and the guilt that he feels, forcing him to battle his demons in a setting that makes them literal. The other characters he comes across are going through similar journeys, witnessing their own versions of hell, which you occasionally catch a glimpse of. Notice how no one else sees Pyramid Head or any of James's monsters.
It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.
Even Laura admits that she sees nothing wrong with the town because she has no inner demons. All the scenes and environments carry a meticulous and subliminal details about psychology and even sexuality, but not in a weird way, just in a bluntly honest way. Unlike most other psychological thriller stories in movies or games, where a lot of details and symbolism is kind of arbitrary or thrown in there, in this case, every detail has a purpose. And ultimately, it's up to the player to determine James's fate. That kind of interaction for a deep, emotional story is powerful and haunting.
But enough of the psychology analyses. You want to hear the scary bits.
The scary Pyramid Head. Not a slasher, but something that lives in your mind, so you can never quite get rid of him. And Pyramid's love scene. Everyone acts creepy. Maybe it's personal issues they're all dealing with or signs of clinical depression, but that doesn't change how everyone acts insane. Like they could kill you or themselves anytime. But unlike a typical monster you encounter, these are human beings, something more complicated and more unpredictable. And it doesn't help they all have creepy designs in their cutscenes. Maybe it's just the early CGI, but that porcelain skin is unsettling. Subliminal suicidal messages throughout. No doubt the game works on a very meticulous design of creepiness, presenting subtle signs of depression, death, and even the inevitable. Very similar to Kubrick's The Shining, whether you enjoyed the book or not, the film had a creepy vibe that you couldn't always explain, and that was because the details were minor and subtle, to which The Shining was an influence for the game, the isolation, the large building to explore, and the subliminal. Other story influences for the game were Blue Velvet, Crime and Punishment, and Jacob's Ladder. And just a list of a few other creepy small details: the Doorman Room, the Indoor Graveyard, the Mary/Maria final boss, strange ambience, whether it be machine humming, heavy breathing, or cockroaches that sound like they're riding tricycles. The Hole. So suggestive. Losing Angela. the helplessness of what you can and cannot do, the fog. Monsters under cars, wah! Radio static, the elevator game show, reality bending hotel, quiet moments, bathroom stall scream, the gallows, the hair collector, the suicide diary, and tons of tiny details that are difficult to remember or see in one playthrough, and other people may notice other things or are scared by other things as well. As for the not so scary, the long walks, the locked doors, the combat. Entering new rooms in darkness is still pretty scary, but doesn't have quite the same impact as, say, Resident Evil.
And so that concludes Silent Hill 2. So, for next time, I was kind of thinking that maybe we should look into...
That's not so scary.